so into Pinot? I mean, it's like a thing with you.
I don't know. It's a hard grape to grow.
If anybody orders Merlot, I'm leaving. I am not drinking any fucking Merlot!
Okay, relax, Miles. Jesus, no Merlot.
Good evening. Welcome to the Winers, where we drink wine and we whine about current events. I'm Ryan Milton, your thin-skinned and temperamental co-host from the State of Confusion. With me are Jeff Norman from Wilmington, North Carolina. Howdy, Jeff.
Good evening to you, Ryan.
And Dennis Fritz, who I'm very happy that is on our show, is a former Air Force Command Chief Master Sergeant who retired from active duty in 2003 after 28 years of amazing active duty service. And he has held two of the Department of Defense's highest enlisted positions and is currently the director of the Eisenhower Media Network. He is author of this incredible book, Deadly Betrayal: The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. Dennis is here with us today to discuss a week after the pretty shocking election of Donald Trump and the Senate and the House, everything that has happened to change the power in the United States. Now we have many of the new cabinet members. And Dennis has some very interesting insights. I think we have a lot of interesting questions. Lots is going on. People are pulling out their hair as evidence. People are rushing for the exits. They're rushing for the entrance. What do you guys think? Pretty exciting times.
Well, I think it's a great night for Pinot Noir. That's why we had the opening from that movie Sideways.
That's right.
I watched that movie 20 years ago, and Paul Giamatti, the protagonist who you saw in those two scenes, is a little bit too in love with the Pinot Noir. And every time I drink Pinot Noir or hear anybody even refer to it since then, I can't help but think of that movie. And tonight, for the first time on the Winers, I'm drinking a Pinot Noir. Wow. Available at Trader Joe's for $6.99. What are you drinking, Dennis?
Well, I'll tell you guys, as Ryan stated that he's losing his hair like many, I've been driven to drink. You know, at one time I said I was not a drinker, and I started in the last few weeks, said, okay, I'm an occasional drinker. And now I think I'm becoming a full-time drinker. So I just told my wife just to pour me something. I don't know what it is, but I'm so in the mood of whining that I decided just pour me anything, and I'm going to drink a glass of wine along with y'all as we whine.
All right, Dennis.
Cheers, big ears. How about you, Ryan?
Well, so I was looking for what did he say in the movie?
Merlot?
I was looking for a Merlot, but then I heard that you were going to threaten me. So I am drinking a Mendoza, Argentina Malbec. And so it's a very nice one. This also comes from our friend Samantha, who called into our last show from the box of wines that she hooked me up with from Naked Wines subscription service. So it's pretty good. Right. It wasn't good when I first opened it, but it's good now.
All right. So we're drinking to the golden age. Ryan posted a new article on our Substack. Check it out. There it is.
There it is.
And there is Ryan in row one with his Maha cohorts, I should say.
Yeah, these are actually Maha people. Yeah.
Right. And just as we were starting or about to start tonight, a little before actually, the news broke that Robert F. Kennedy has been nominated or appointed, whatever the right word is, for the head of Health and Human Services.
Yes, he has been nominated. And people, I think, are very excited. Actually, Dennis, you might be able to answer this question. I was looking up the budget of Health and Human Services versus the Defense Department, and they're both huge budgets. So
Go ahead.
No, I think the defense is about 800 billion.
850 billion.
Billion, right. And then Health and Human Services has a $130 billion, what do they call it? It's a discretionary budget, but then they have another 1.7 trillion on top of that is related to Medicare, Medicaid, things like that, that is non-negotiable. So it's huge.
Well, that's going to be interesting. That's not my area of expertise, but I'm going to be following that pretty good, to see what he does. Because, over the years, he's had some concern, about immunizations. And I think a lot of people have. If you go back to the COVID, I have family members that, in the medical career field, and they had some concern about it, mainly because of the fact the COVID vaccine, usually most vaccines, it's at least a 10-year period of ensuring there's no long-term effects of it. And we were somewhat rushed into that. As you know, he was totally against the COVID vaccine. So,
he was against an untest, right? Just automatically insisting on it.
Exactly.
Because I think he even said that he had all of his vaccines except that one. And it's interesting because I had some family members who were very upset about everything in the last week. And they were saying, we're going to lose our right to have abortions. And the argument had been, hands off my body. And my uncle, I don't know why this would matter to him, but he said, I don't want the Fed coming between me and my body. But the funny thing about that is that then when it came to COVID, that was not the same thing. It was mandatory. It was not the same kind of policy. And I think the whole point of having things tested and having these mega corporations, it's really hard to say that there's a big difference between, the military industrial complex and what's happening in medicine and drugs.
Or the pharmaceutical company, to be exact.
Exact.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me just say this, and then we'll get off on that. Like I said, that's not my area of expertise, but I will say this. All the New York workers in the medical career field, they were vindicated later on, when they got their jobs back. And I think some of them actually got retroactive pay as well. So they were vindicated in their stance against, experimenting in something that had not been truly tested and was being forced on us.
Right. Now, whether he's right or wrong about vaccines or any particular issue, I think the guy's not corrupt. And that makes it great news. So I'm very happy. And we'll see. There's a lot that's under the Health and Human Services Department, right? Is the FDA, I think, under that?
FDA.
Yeah.
And somebody is saying FDA people are threatening to resign. And I think that actually that might be what some of them should do.
Yeah. Well, or they may get fired. So that's probably going to resign because he said he's already going to tear everything up. So, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, not my area of expertise, but I will be following it. Well,
let's get to your area of expertise.
Yeah.
My area of expertise is to try to be influential. I put this out and it actually got retweeted quite a bit and wanted to just make it clear that a lot of Trump supporters didn't want Marco Rubio picked as the Secretary of State. Nonetheless, he was picked. What do you think about that, Dennis?
Well, I will tell you, he worked hard for it. There are some people that have sold their soul just for positions and power. And Rubio has always wanted to be the Secretary of State. I don't know why, but what concerns me about that, I was asked a question last week before President-elect Trump started picking his cabinet. And they asked me, what do I think and, who do I think he would pick? And I said, well, I tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be watching because he said he has a distaste for war and all these wars we've been in. And in fact, if you highlighted my book earlier, about the Iraq war, which he called a stupid war, if you will. And so I said, okay, well, maybe we'll be able to get out of Ukraine, which I still feel somewhat confident about that. But my biggest concern has been the Middle East and in regards to the Gaza-Israeli conflict, in which the bigger conflict, which I'm really worried about, is Iran. And when he picked Rubio, that really concerned me. Whoa, what direction are we going into? I thought you said you hated stupid wars. Well, guess what? Rubio loves stupid wars. And that's a big concern for me with his, so-called distaste for war and stupid wars. And Rubio, he's been a big supporter of Israel. And I will tell you, I always tell folks, we got to use critical thinking. The mainstream media and the pundits that believe in American imperialism and all these wars, they will try to discredit you if you go against the mainstream. And I tell folks, hey, just look for yourself. Use critical thinking. People don't give you money just for nothing. We all have agendas. And if you look at Rubio, I think if I remember right, Rubio received, I think, some $109,000 from AIPAC, and I think $77,000 from the Republican Jewish Coalition. So they were the primary donors of his campaigns, I think, from, since he's, been in the Senate. And so think about that.
Yeah, actually, Dennis, in your book, you had said that there were three basic missions or goals of the neocons, and I want to get to this on the question of Rubio and some of these others, kind of as a more general thing, not so specific to Rubio in particular, but one of them was to reassert our dominance as the unipolar power. One of them you said was Israel. But the thing about this is that I'm thinking about is that while we can say these kinds of criticisms about all of these different guys, Rubio wasn't the guy that won the election. In other words, Trump won the election. As you said, Trump is the guy who said, I want to get out of this war in Ukraine, end the war. And he did say he wants to end the situation in the Middle East. He said, he doesn't want to be in a conflict with Iran. Of course, he bounces back and forth. I realize that, or China. And we'll get to some of this later. But
exactly.
My thinking is Rubio, he doesn't implement his own ideas as Secretary of State. In other words, it's the policy of the president, isn't it?
Well, true. But also, you got to think about who the president surrounds himself with. Let's first, we're going to talk about Rubio and all the others I have concern with his picks. But at the same time, now, with President-elect Trump picking Rubio and others, Pete from Fox News, Elisa from the New York is a congressman there. If you look at all those, to include Matt Gaetz, if you will, we'll talk about all these later, they're all loyalists. I mean, true loyalists. And he said he was going to do that.
Yeah.
And if you look at the pick of Rubio, as I said, some people will sell their soul for positions and power. He's always wanted to be the Secretary of State. And so, yes, it's the president's
and that might be why he's been warming up to Trump since their initial hostility towards one another. In that opening in the wine movie, did you see the way the actress was looking at Paul Giamatti as he was talking? That's how Marco Rubio looks at Trump nowadays.
Exactly, little Rubio. I mean, I don't want to use that term, but he sucked up to him, because he wanted power. Like I said, early on, in their earlier campaign, during the first time Trump was running, there was almost arch enemies, if you will.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Exactly.
Well, I was listening to our favorite weapons inspector on Garland Nixon earlier today. He said this is the key appointment right there. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. One of the responsibilities of this position is to deliver the presidential daily briefing every day. She's the one who's going to be putting together all the different intelligence from all the agencies, including the CIA and all of them. And she's the one who theoretically is going to be the one who's influencing Trump the most. Scott's feeling is Rubio and all the others are going to have to just take orders and carry it out. Their role is not to implement policy.
Well, yeah, exactly. Remember I said, now, that's what Trump wanted, loyalists. But at the same time, I still cannot forget about their doctrine and their ideology of those folks that he picked. If I look at the history of them and how they see the world, but yes, I think he does have loyalists. And oh, by the way, I think whatever he says, they're going to do. I mean, that's why he picked them. Now, when you talk about Tulsi, she's, there are some things that she's truly against all those others. She's taking the heat. When I say you go against the the mainstream, whether it be foreign policy or the media. You know, she's taking a big hit because she went over to Syria to see Assad. Oh, she's the worst thing in the world now. You know, she went over. But let me just tell you, when they said Assad used chemical weapons, I think that was a false flag. Yeah. I really do. That's my personal opinion, because no sooner than this was doing, you know, when Obama was in the presidency, you know, that was supposed to be Obama's red line. You know, first of all, what gives us the right to attack any country if they're not, you know, a threat to us? You know, regime change and all that stuff. What gives us the right to do that? But anyway, that was the red line. You know, if Assad was to use chemical weapons, well, guess what? All of a sudden, chemical weapons showed up.
Yes.
You know, and so as I tell folks, critical thinking again. Think about that. All of a sudden, you know, and so she visits her. Now she's the worst person in the world. Okay, you know, they say she's a talking point for, you know, Russia.
Putin.
Yeah, I want y'all to think about this. I've said it before. With the Eisenhower Media Network, in May of last year, or 2023, we put out a New York Times paid ad that stated that the U.S. should be a force for peace. And in that, and your audience can look that up. You know, they can Google it. You know, the U.S. should be a force for peace. Eisenhower Media Network, New York Times. And then we put a map there, and that map showed. Let's suppose that Russia had nuclear weapons and fighter aircraft in Canada and New Mexico. We would lose our minds. Our security would be at risk. But that's what we've been doing to Russia, expanding NATO all the way to their front door. And their red line was Ukraine, because guess what? The time it takes for a nuclear weapon now to get to Russia from Ukraine, because if you become a part of NATO, you know, you become a part of that nuclear arm. And so, you know, we don't have empathy for others' national security. All we want to do is just control everything. Russia is a strong nation, a nuclear nation, and they're not going to let us control them. So because of the fact she pointed that out, now she's the worst thing. She should not be. I will tell you, she's a very smart lady, you know, and, you know, it takes, first of all, what I'll look for, now I hate to be, you know, bad, but of all those so far, she has the most integrity. You know, she's taking a big hit, and she has the most integrity, and she has judgment.
And she believes in talking to people and diplomacy. She also got heat from her party when she was a Democrat because she met with Trump. And I was like, out of my mind with like, I can't believe these people would criticize a senator for meeting with the president. Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
Wow. Jeff, let me say something to that. This is something I've always wanted to say, how bad we are. I always wonder, why do we want, I see Ryan smiling because, you know, I'm getting worked up now.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, this is perfect.
Why do we want other countries to trust us when we don't even trust ourselves? Think about doing a national incident when we have hurricanes, whatever, and the president, no matter what party, to go and see, hey, what can I do to help? And the local governor, because he or she is a different political party, can't meet with them, can't shake their hands. You know, and that's, we're supposed to be the United States of America, because she met with Trump. You know, it's likewise on both parties. You can't seem to meet. We're Americans. We talk about how we love America. We're Americans, but we can't talk to one another. That's governor cannot meet the president of the United States during a national, a natural disaster. That's lunatic. But yet we expect other countries to trust us when every 4 years, half the country don't trust the president.
No, that's absolutely a good point. I saw this from some of my neighbors, where people were saying they were going on to their litany about this is what will happen with Trump, and then somebody said, well, maybe, you know, next time the shooter won't miss. So people have become so polarized that they literally find themselves becoming like tools of the establishment. So I want to make a point from something you said about Tulsi and these others also. There's a lot of pressure on, you know, how to think about these things, where you have a lot of people. Now, I'm not an expert. Dennis, I think you're an expert. Scott is an expert. I'm not an expert, but I find that suddenly there's tons of experts out there about, you know, what this all means with all of these different appointments. Of course, number one, we know that they all have to get approved by the Senate. There's no guarantee that they're going to get approved by the Senate.
Or do they?
Yeah, I'm smiling too. Yeah.
Well,
recess.
Sure. But then, you know, you have people saying, well, see, this proves, you know, Trump's desire to end war is bad. So it's like, throw them all out. It's like people kind of edit the reality factor. Scott was saying on some interview the other day, he said, look, Israel in a certain sense doesn't enter into my mind anymore. It's kind of, he meant it like you can't really find policymakers across the board for all these positions who are not somehow influenced, number one, I think. True. And number two, Israel is self-destructing. They are melting down to the point that there might not be an Israel very soon. And so it doesn't even matter. But what I find is interesting is when you look at the people like John Bolton. I don't know if you ever worked with John Bolton, but you see him, he's very upset that Tulsi would be in there, or that the policy of the United States would be one of an actual dialogue. There was another one here that I saw. Here's Bolton again, and we'll get back to Pete Hegseth, but he's furious about Pete Hegseth getting in there. This is Abigail Spanberger, who is a former CIA case officer, infuriated about Tulsi Gabbard. So I find that it's just as interesting who is attacking these potential leaders before the race has even started in a certain way.
Ryan, I was about to burst when you mentioned John Bolton. Now I got to take my first sip.
He's as emotional about John Bolton as Paul Giamatti is about Pinot Noir.
Oh, man.
Let me just say this.
But in a different
John
direction.
Bolton is the biggest criminal that came out of the Bush administration. Here it is. He's talking about something, and he had to be the United Nations ambassador. He had to be appointed by way of recess. A fine person for him to talk. His staff didn't like him. And I will tell you, one of my colleagues, Larry Wilkerson, he's absolutely not a fan. He was backdooring Colin Powell. He was the plant that was in the State Department when Colin Powell was the Secretary of State. And, I tell folks there are neocons, true neocons, and neocon sympathizers. John Bolton is an original true neocon. And what bothers me, you can't get people like Scott Ritter, myself on the mainstream media, but you get a person like John Bolton that appears on CNN all the time that is a warmonger that helped tell and spread the lies about Iraq having WMD, one of the biggest promoters about bombing Iran would get a lot of people killed. And we have the nerve to want to listen to him and have him on CNN in the mainstream talking about Tulsi Gabbard. As I stated before, I would give it to her. She has integrity. Regardless how you feel about it, John Bolton has no integrity whatsoever. Zero. Ask people to do critical thinking again. Look at some of his interviews. He's a warmonger.
So look, say something. Go back to what you said. You had this interesting thing. There are the true believer neocons, and then there's sort of those that are sympathizers. So how would you characterize some of these people? Like when I go back and look at the Project for a New American Century.
The PNAC. That is funny you said that. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I read their whole founding report, and it was mind-blowing about this whole Pax Americana world empire that they were very okay. But like Marco Rubio, he wasn't even politically born back then, right?
That's my point. So I consider him a sympathizer because the original neocons, first of all, the neocons started under the Reagan administration. The neocons have spread and infiltrated both parties now. The neocons were originally, you ready for this? Democrats, okay?
Right.
And they wanted
Scoop Jackson, under Scoop Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. That's where they all came. And then they fell in love with the Reagan doctrine against the Soviet Union, tear down this wall. And so they ran over it, to him. People like Paul Wolfowitz, original. In the Pentagon, he came with this called Defense Policy Guidance, taken from the PNAC, the acronym, of no military rivalry, to include, and that was pointed at the Soviet Union at the time. But at the same time, they have different factions of the neocons. You have those like Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld was really not a neocon per se,
really,
but he believed in America's imperialism. If you go back and read the chapter I talk about Rumsfeld, he believed in America as a whole. That hey, we're the most powerful, country, and that's what he believed in. But you have different factions. Okay, that one about no military rivalry. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was Rumsfeld's. And that's what really, make him somewhat of a neocon. But then you had the people like Paul Wolfowitz, was a true neocon. Doug Feith, who was the number 3 at the Pentagon, true neocons. They were the Israel faction. Their sole reason for existence was Israel. And then you had the sympathizer. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Who they were able to convince, like a President George Bush, because of the fact he believed in freedom. So there was different agendas, as you saw in the book, and they convinced him, hey, you can get a democratized. Think about countries that have been in existence way before us and democracy, but we're going to democratize the Middle East. Bush was part of that faction. They all came together. They convinced Bush, Rumsfeld, the bully bullpit, hey, we're the strongest nation in the world. So if we want peace, we want democratize the Middle East, we want to secure Israel, well, then we go to war. And that was their answer. And
one person in the comments, Sarah, she, I think, misunderstood what you were saying about Larry Wilkerson.
Oh, no.
No, he's not the plant. I think the Bolton was the plant, meant to spy on Colin Powell. And
Larry Wilkerson is what you would consider a patriot.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he's a true patriot. Larry Wilkerson was Colin Powell's chief of staff. Right. What I stated was John Bolton was the one neocon that was planted in the State Department to keep an eye. Powell was considered an outsider, but he was part of the Bush family, if you will. He was Daddy Bush, National Security Advisor, and so he was part of the family. That's why he became part of the state. The Secretary of State, like Condoleezza Rice. She had been around the Bushes, probably her entire adult life.
But Powell,
let's try to get through some of the other.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because we have limited time here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. One of the surprises was Pete Hegseth. He's some people are referring to him as just simply a Fox News announcer, but he also is a decorated veteran. Let's take a look at a little film clip.
Anyone have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years? I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. I think we ought to give Pete Hegseth a chance because he's got two. All the criticism of him is that he's not the expected Washington pick. And I'm just saying to you that the American people just voted against the expected Washington pick. So he's got 20 years in service, Afghanistan, Iraq, 2 Bronze Stars, Princeton, Harvard. Yeah, he's on TV, but so are the rest of us.
And one more on Pete, because I think it's good if you don't mind.
Yeah, I didn't really set that clip up properly. That wasn't obviously Pete, but that was Scott Jennings on CNN talking about him. Go ahead.
And now here's Pete.
War games against China. We lose every time. Inside the Pentagon war games. We know what our real capability. You see, we didn't even get to this part of the war on warriors. I mean, the military-industrial complex, the way we procure weapon systems. We're always the way our system works, the way our bureaucratic system works, where the speed of weapons procurement works. We're always a decade behind in fighting the last war. Whereas China, we have, what did Rumsfeld say? You go to the war, the army you have. We have the army. China's building an army specifically dedicated to defeating the United States of America. That is their strategic outset. Take hypersonic missiles. So if our whole power projection platform is aircraft carriers and the ability to project power that way strategically around the globe. And yeah, we have a nuclear triad and all of that, but a big part of it. And if, 15 hypersonic missiles can take out our 10 aircraft carriers in the first 20 minutes of a conflict.
So what do you think, Dennis? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth coming out of nowhere, surprising everybody.
Well, I would tell you, before the announcement of Matt Gaetz, that was the biggest surprise. Whoa, where did that come from? Right. The weekend host of Fox, talk show on weekends, and all of a sudden, we tend, and I spent 28 years in the military, and we tend to, how can I say this and be nice? It's been my family. I've been around the military all my life. My dad served 20-something years. But we tend to overblow that, hey, just because a person has been in the military, been in combat, that person is qualified to be, the DOD. It's hard. That is, look, I spent half my life in the adult life in the Pentagon. My first assignment in the Pentagon was in 1979, and I went back and forth to the Pentagon until 2022. It is a huge, huge agency.
Yeah.
You know, with Matt, you know, I think he's smart. He has the degrees from the Princetons and the Harvards of the world. And as you heard him talk, he articulated himself very well. If Trump wanted him in, the Pentagon to do those things, I think he should have put him in what we call OSD, Undersecretary of Defense with PNR. And I forgot what it was now. Not programs and resources, but anyway, OSD PNR, and that's where he would have control of policy with
Personnel and readiness.
Personnel and readiness. There you go. Personnel and readiness. My man, talk to me, Ryan. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, do you think he could be? Do you think he could be successful if he has people who are more experienced than him and sort of supporting him, and he listens to them?
Yeah, I think that's part of the plan. You know, he's going to have some folks I may not agree with, like Jack Keane from a 4-star general that's on Fox News quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll have him and others. But here's why. Now, like I said, I always tell folks I can give you facts, opinions, and assumptions. My assumption, the reason President-elect Trump picked him was because of the fact, well, we've seen it ourselves. Like I said, you go back and look for yourself. I don't say anything that I haven't seen or you haven't seen. Man, I like that guy. That guy really likes me, and hey, okay, that's number one. And we're talking about a loyalist, where Pete is a loyalist of Trump. But the other biggie that I want people to think about, I think he did it to poke the eyes of the generals. Because as you know, he had no luck with the 3 generals I think was closest to him, Miley being the worst he hated, and then Kelly, who was his chief of staff for a while, and then Mattis, who was his SecDef. As you notice, originally he loved 4-star generals, but they all end up, going against him. So I think he actually did that to poke it in the eye. Here it is. We have a young major that's now going to be the Secretary of Defense. So I think not only does he have a loyalist there, but I think also now he poked that in the eyes of the generals. And I think he really did that because of his experience with the 3, generals that he had that worked for him in his first term.
What about this warrior board that is the aim apparently is to get rid of the generals? What do you think of that? I don't even understand exactly what it is.
Yeah, that is going to be interesting because that will really tear up. That'll hurt our national security. I don't see how that's going to happen. I think you saw in the open press where the Pentagon was actually having contingency meetings, whether it be, how do we prevent him from, putting soldiers out on our city streets, against American citizens. And that's another one. Purging of general officers. That was disrupt our national security so badly, as you heard Pete talk about right now, the Navy and the things we need to do, to prepare for China, if you will. And so that's scary.
Well,
really.
Dennis, but Scott, also Colonel McGregor has talked about how we have more flag grade officers now than during World War II. And we had more men under arms at that time than we do now.
Oh, yeah.
And we were much more efficient and functioning back then than we are now. So that I think the issue is this revolving door between, like Raytheon and the department.
Yeah, look, that's part of the military-industrial complex with Eisenhower, warned us about, and then, others. Listen, when it comes to the revolving door, that's how general officers, stay relevant. I'm a general officer. I'm going to help this company bring in more contracts, if you will, and continue that revolving door. Then one of them going to be the Secretary of Defense, as in Austin case, when you mentioned Raytheon. But you said something, Ryan, I wanted to comment. What was the other thing you said?
We have more flag grade officers. Yeah.
That is true. But this is going to surprise you. The number of general officers that we have more relative to the number of troops that we have right now. But you know what drives a lot of general officers, especially 3- and 4-star positions? Money to local economies and what it brings. And why do you say that, Fritz? If you have a 4-star general in your city or your surrounding area, that's usually a major command, and it's going to bring in, money to your local community. So what are you saying? Congress. You couldn't have that many general officers if it wasn't for Congress supporting that. And it brings money, like they're fighting right now. If you've heard, Trump is talking about moving Space Command, which is in Colorado Springs right now, to Alabama.
Yeah, why
And
is he
those-
doing all that kind of stuff? He's saying move all these different departments all over the place.
Reward. Alabama, red state, rewarding those there.
Got it.
The senator who's been
Plus, even aside from that, why does everything have to be in Washington? What's so bad
No,
about
but Space Command is not. It's in Colorado Springs, like you
We're
said.
talking about moving into Alabama.
So the
I
point
see.
is,
So it's already out of
yeah,
way,
Dennis, you're saying the Congress is complicit in the graft.
Absolutely. They have to approve all that. They have to approve all general office promotions, the number of general officers, all that is law. The number. So anytime there's someone creating another billet for a general officer, that has to be approved by Congress.
All right, let's try to get through a few more because we only have Dennis for a limited time. Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor.
I just have a simple question for you. Is the world safer under your tenure as secretary?
I think the world is an incredibly dangerous place, but we're able to deal with it more effectively and in a more secure manner because we've rebuilt our alliances, created new ones. We have more partners.
How's our alliance with our Afghan partners and allies? How's that going?
The ones that, the many that we've brought to the United States since withdrawing from Afghanistan.
Did deterrence fail Putin from invading Ukraine?
Putin was prevented because of our leadership in not preventing from erasing Ukraine from the map.
Should the invasion have happened?
I'm sorry.
Did deterrence fail? We had a whole panoply of threatened sanctions, isolation, diplomatic isolation. But at the end of the day, he still invaded.
He did indeed.
Failed.
And no.
Has deterrence failed Iran supporting terrorism and its terrorist organizations and attacking Israel?
Unfortunately, horrifically, Iran has supported terrorism for decades.
Mr. Secretary, I have here the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, the invasion of Ukraine, the unholy alliance between Russia and China, Hamas and Hezbollah attacks on Israel, Houthi attacking international shipping, hostages in Gaza, Iran flush with cash, the reemergence of ISIS-K now, 6 thwarted attacks in Europe, increased Chinese aggression, and the collapse of our influence in Central Africa and the Sahel. And we get 5 minutes for the million people I represent in a public hearing, and you're going to tell the American people with this list they're safer?
Is he just carrying on as a political adversary, or is he making some sincere and valid points there, Dennis?
He's making imperialistic points. You know, I worked out a key word he said. Influence in Africa. Influence means control. Okay, that's what we want to do. It goes back to the PNAC, as Ryan mentioned earlier. It's about control, influence. All these wars we fight are not about our defense. There's really no threat to us other than nuclear countries, like Russia and China, and I don't think North Korea can reach us right now. Maybe they can reach part of California. But our whole thing is about influence. What worries me about him is that you heard Pete mention about China, where Waltz is the most China hawk of all of them. He is. I'm trying to talk more about China. He's mainly talking about the Middle East, but he is a China hawk, and I don't understand that. China does not want to see us as an enemy. They actually want to be a trading partner with us, and you take that to the bank. That's a fact. After Nixon went over there and said, hey, you could be a trading partner, they came out being a third world country to now, on the scene of being a great economy. They're quasi, they're still a economy, but they're quasi, capitalism. They love it. They do a lot of trading for us. We always talking about going to war with China. But doggone, Walmart will collapse. We will collapse because all our goods come from China because of cheap labor. Nixon started that. He's the one that opened it up for China. But guess what? Working with them, then they became a competitor. We can't stand competitors. Now they're almost what Waltz would say as an enemy. China is no threat to us. They can be a threat to us. They started building up. I was in the Pentagon when we started looking at that, when we thought we were going to escape, the Middle East and get out of Europe and all that. We started in 2009, started looking at making China, our adversary. It went from being, like I said, a competitor to now an adversary. So it worries me about him because of the fact he's a China hawk. And China, look, they had their doctrine was non-intervention, stay out of other people's business. But they started changing that because they saw us as aggressors, making them an adversary instead of working with us. The only thing China wants from us is to stay out of their business when it comes to Taiwan. So they see that as internally, but because we have this so-called democratized, doctrine that, hey, we're going to give Taiwan all the weapons they need. We're going to make sure they so-called stay in the West. But China's saying, hey, they're a runaway province, if you will. They're a part of us, and we're going to work that together somehow. But United States, stay out of it.
Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel. He's more Jewish than people who are actually Jewish. This guy is
he's what you consider a Christian Zionist.
Yeah. He's a religious zealot. There's a lot of ways we could characterize him. Here's the evidence of that, lest you doubt what we're saying.
But there is something else about Israel that I believe mirrors that of the history of the United States. I do not believe that it is possible to understand, to even comprehend the United States of America without believing that it involved the providence of God. And I do not believe that it is possible for anybody to look at the remarkable, stunning history, not only of ancient Israel, but of the modern nation of Israel, and somehow believe that that could be without the providence and the hand of Almighty God. There is simply no other explanation. And for those of you who embrace and believe in the Bible, and I would assume that most of you in the RJC do, then I would have to say that I affirm the reality of Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. God says those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. That's either true or it is not. I believe it is true.
He's a believer.
Absolutely. Like I said, Christian Zionist. Listen, when that was another scary one for me too. Like you said as the president, Trump will be making policy, but they are advisors. They get all these folks, that's going to have his ear. Huckabee, oh my goodness. When I saw that pic, I said, oh Lord. I said Gaza and the Palestinians are doomed, because he doesn't see he don't think there's no such thing as Palestinian people. He's on record of saying that.
Yeah.
So as the Israeli ambassador, for the U.S., what do you think, is going to be? Bibi Netanyahu was probably so happy, and I'm sure he had a part of that too. Huckabee spent so much time in Israel, it'll shock you, and him being the ambassador over there as a person, what bothers me too. Let me just get this out. You're talking about a so-called minister, a believer in God and Christ, if you will, but yet you're condoning the killing of innocent women and children. You talk about how we're against abortion, the unborn. Well, we got the born being maimed and killed. As I told folks, I work with the Wounded Warrior Program, not the Wounded Warrior Project, but the official Wounded Warrior sanctioned Pentagon Wounded Warrior Program. I spent a lot of time at Walter Reed. It is painful when you have a military member that's gone through an amputation, even with the best anesthesia in the world. Mm-hmm. You got young children that are being maimed and amputees with no anesthesia. And yet you got this man, Huckabee, who's supposed to be a Christian, condoning that and pushing that, and then saying there's no such thing as Palestinian people. I want all of us, all your audience, to think about that. What kind of man is that? What kind of God do you serve?
All right. What about John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, who will be working under Tulsi Gabbard? Let's take a look at what I think is a shining moment for him, but I think there may be more to the story. Let's take a look.
The approximately 50,000 text messages that I've seen with your personal beliefs like F Trump, stop Trump, impeach Trump, go ahead and confirm on the record that none of that occurred on an official FBI device or on official FBI time. Go ahead and do that.
Sir, no, they did. Many of them did.
Oh, they did. Okay, so
50,000, sir.
So really, no, I'll give you a chance at the end. So what you really meant to say was that when you said you never crossed that bright, inviolable line, what you meant to say was, except for 50,000 times, except for hundreds of times a day where I went back and forth expressing my personal opinions about effing Trump and stopping Trump and impeaching Trump on official FBI phones on official FBI time. Other than that, you never crossed that line. I'm sure there are 13,000 FBI agents out there that are beaming with pride at how clearly you've drawn that line. Agent Strucker, you're starting to understand why some folks out there don't believe a word you say, and why it's especially troubling that you, of all people, are at the center of the 3 highest profile investigations in recent times that involve President Trump, and that you were in charge of an investigation investigating, gathering evidence against Donald Trump, a subject that you hated, that you wanted to F him, to stop him, to impeach him. And do you see why that might call into question everything you've touched on all of those investigations? Chairman, I'm done with this witness, and I yield back.
Ooh.
Well, what I'll say, I don't know too much about him, other than he's another Trump loyalist. Okay, I mean that's across the board. Trump. Listen, Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He followed the Republican tradition, the Democrat tradition of getting your transition team together of experts, or if you want to say the deep state, people that's been around Washington, and that revolving door, and that helped him pick his cabinet in his first term as president. This time he said he was going to pick loyalists, and that's what he is doing. But in the case of him, I think at the end of Trump's first administration, when it comes to the end, he had acting. Well, I think he acted as the DNI for a while there, if I remember right. And so, he does have some experience, for your audience, Director of National Intelligence, which one is Tulsa is going in. And so I think he do have some experience, but he's a Trump loyalist. And so,
yeah. Of course, he was grilling that scumbag Peter Strzok from the FBI, which brings to mind, well, who's going to be the FBI director? That's one position that we don't know yet. We also don't know who's going to run the Secret Service. There's some rumors that it might be Dan Bongino. But the FBI director's boss, whom you referenced earlier, Matt Gaetz, the biggest surprise of all, has been named as the new Attorney General. And he's not even so popular in his own party. Let's take a look at a film clip with the firebrand, as he's often called, Matt Gaetz.
I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
you won't answer the
protecting
question
anyone
about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you.
Here's what I will say to that. There are 2 positions that are normally not impacted by a change of administration. The FBI being one of those. I think they have like a 10-year term, and I don't know where he is in his term. And so that'll be interesting. So he's going to have to be fired. Most cabinet members, they resign, it's happening now. The president come in and pick his cabinet members. So it's going to be interesting. So I think that would, unless he resigns, I think that will be the first move that Gaetz make is firing the FBI director, which usually, that's going to be surprising, unheard of, because they have 10-year terms. So you won't have that political driven thing, and it's usually a political job that both Republicans and Democrats have accepted the incumbent FBI director. Let me just mention one other position too. It's going to be interesting to follow from the Pentagon. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Usually the military are out of so-called politics. You have a guy by the name of General C.Q. Brown, who used to be the chief of staff of the Air Force, who I happened to spend some time with, in Hawaii for a couple of briefings a few years ago. He's going into right now his 2nd year. Usually they do 2-year terms, 4. Usually be a total of 4. So Gaetz, he has already said that he's going to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is unusual too. So that's going to be part of when you talked about earlier the purge. I'm watching that real closely, because if we come in and fire the chairman, that is unheard of, because like I said, he's in his 2nd year. Oh, by the way, Trump is the one that appointed him to be the chief of staff of the Air Force too. So that's going to be interesting. So the 2 positions I'm following is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the FBI.
So, though Gates, he also was involved in removing Speaker of the House McCarthy.
Oh.
That was also the first time that had ever happened before in American history.
I wrote a note when y'all was talking about. I wrote myself a note about McCarthy. That's why he's hated by both parties. The Democrats just hate him, but they hate him for what he did to McCarthy. The Republicans hate him for that.
But a lot of Republicans, I think 8 Republicans voted with him. And then, of course, Lindsey Graham hates him. But is that a bad thing? That's a good thing.
Well, yeah, that could be a good thing.
Well, hold on. We're talking about it being a surprise. We're talking about who likes him and doesn't like him. But I still haven't heard if Dennis likes this choice.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you talking about Gates?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
I mean, think about this. This guy was under investigation.
Yes.
It's going to come out in the House. Like anything, they're going to leak it.
But he was never even indicted, though. You say it like he was guilty.
Well, there was a lot of evidence there. They had a witness who was supposed to have been one of the ones that was exported across state lines and so forth.
But it was the opposition party who could have indicted him, which is even short of putting him on trial and getting him convicted. If not due to lack of evidence, why do you suppose that didn't happen?
Look, that's true. But look, we all are humans. Everything is a popularity contest or a beauty contest. I don't care for his style of leadership. But look, like some have said, he's serving. The president can pick who he desires. So let me just say, and one thing about that, whether we like it or not, I personally don't mind the president picking people that he seems loyal to him. I mean, I have no problem with that. We all dislike his choices, but he did win. He won the popular vote and he won the electoral college vote, and he's doing what he said he was going to do. And so now what I would tell folks, we have to sit back and watch now, to see what he's going to do. Some of the things he said he's going to do, he will do.
Yeah, Dennis, if you were in there, if this had been the cabinet so far that we knew, and you were there, maybe in a kitchen cabinet to incoming President Trump, I mean, given this cabinet, how would you advise him to act? Given these people, you wouldn't say fire them all. I mean, maybe you would, but
who are you talking about now?
I'm just saying, if you were in Trump's kitchen cabinet, right? He's got those close people that are not going to be appointed that he's going to talk to. Let's say you're one of them.
Mm-hmm. And who you talking about firing? That's my point. When you said
fire, I'm saying, what do you do with this cabinet that you now have, that we have just kind of gone through some of the key people to make policy? Because he has to make the government work now.
True.
He has to make the country work. He has made promises about getting out of these wars. These people, some of them are good, maybe Tulsi, for example, Kennedy, but this is what you got. So now how do you make the country work?
Ryan, I don't know. Let me just say this. I don't know. Let me just say this. Let me just say this. Listen to what's happening here. He said, as I stated earlier, I don't like wars. These wars are stupid.
Yeah.
But so far in his national security arena, he's picked all warmongers.
Right.
Now they're loyal. I think his first test was loyalty. Okay, he got that. But as far as I stated earlier, there are cabinet members, but there are policy recommenders. That's the people you go to. Okay, what do you think? He does not have a voice that's not aligned with their Middle East policy. And that's what I'm scared of. I tell you what, the only one that I really have any faith in is Tulsi. Like I said, I think she has integrity. I just think she was black marked because the Democrats were mad at her because she left the party. But she was talking sense. Hey, look, and another thing that bothers me, the Republicans used to be the war party. Now, I don't know who the war party is now. The Democrats have become the war party. We need diplomacy and peace in the world. And we're the ones that's driving, I'm just being candid, these wars. Just think about, we're all over the world talking about influence. Influence. And let me just, the bottom line to this, and what got me in this crusade is we talked about why I wrote my book. I said 4,000, I said deadly betrayal. Why did I say that? 4,500 military men and women died based on a WMD lie to take us to war. Think about that. What got me in this crusade is to keep us out of future wars, because most wars are based on lies and fabrication.
All right, let's do we said we'd keep you for only an hour, but let's maybe spend 5 minutes going through a few more.
You got me. Let's keep going. As long as you like.
Well, let's do a lightning round. Just give it to us like 30 seconds each, if you have any opinion at all about some of the other appointees or nominees. How about Susie Wiles, White House Chief of Staff?
I don't know her, but I think she's a good pick for him, because they said, hey, look, the first thing she demanded, hey, I'm going to be in charge. I'm going to be the gatekeeper. And that was part of the problem of people sneaking in on the first administration. You say, before I take the job. And hey, I come to find out, too, one of my friends told me this. I think it's Pat Summerall. I think that's his daughter.
Yeah.
Look that up. That surprised me a little bit, you know.
So that means she's qualified if she's.
No, I just say that was a gee whiz thing that surprised me. No,
yeah, it's interesting. All right, we mentioned him earlier, but I don't know if you really gave your opinion. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS Secretary.
A lot of people don't like him. You know, they throw him in the comparison. I think that's a good pick. You know, I do think. Listen, it goes back to the COVID shot. You know, when it was forced down our throat. And I'll give you a classic example. You know, I do have a concern about immunizations. You know, I think it should be personal choice. Where we talk about freedom, I don't take the flu shot. You know, each year, the doctor tried to get me to take the COVID shot. I don't take that. I took it the first time. But let me just give you a classic example of my personal experience. Back in the day, I think around the 2000s, when we had the anthrax, you know, throughout the United States, you know, and we finally caught that cover, it was mandatory for all military to take the anthrax shot. And as a senior leader, they wanted me to go around and say, oh, the anthrax shot is perfectly safe. I refused to do that. I said, I'm not going to do that because I'm not a doctor. I'm not. Right. I can say, I can't imagine it not being safe since we're going to inoculate the entire service, but I'm not going to say it's safe. And that's what happened in the COVID shot. You had people running out there because they were told to say, hey, go out there and say it's safe.
Right.
Me personally in the military, where I probably could have got court-martialed. I said, I'm not going to go out there and tell the truth because I saw people that had some reactions to the anthrax shot.
All right, so here's one that's not a cabinet.
I think it's a good pick. I think it's a good pick. I think we should challenge.
So there's two that you like so far.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, here's one that's not a cabinet position, and so some people are saying, well, maybe there's no authority. It won't amount to much. I don't happen to agree, but let's see what you guys think. The Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. That's an invention. What is going to come of that?
Ramaswamy, I think that's a good. Listen, the president is picking his cabinet. I think that's a good choice because he's really a smart guy, you know.
Yeah.
And
no, but that's not a cabinet position. That's just some. I don't know what department. To call it.
Yeah, but that's why they did it. There's no department, but he can use him, and I think that'll be one of the inside people that Trump, I think, will be going to for advice. With Musk, I'm scared of him. You know, like I said, everybody have agendas. You know, he got a lot of money. He's going to have a lot of say. I mean, you know, you heard a lot about conflict of interest and all that. That scares me. And guess what? He can get away with that because he's not a cabinet member. He's not going to have to be confirmed. He's an advisor to the president. And so he can practically do what he wants to do. That's scary because there's no checks and balances there.
What do you think, Ryan, about that invention and those two people?
You know, it sounds good. I'm not a follower of Milton Friedman. I'm concerned that maybe Elon might be. So, like Millet down in what is it, Argentina? I think that there is a lot of government agencies that have just way too much going on. But I don't think it's about size. It's about the quality of the people that are in there. You know, it's that interagency. It's this unelected bureaucracy that says the policy is not going to change because we're just going to keep doing the same thing we've done. That has to be uncovered. We need to see it. I thought this was also part of the whole idea of the new administration to clear up who was involved in Kennedy's assassinations from the institutional thing. You know, is this going to be part of, we haven't heard any of these cabinet people that are supposed to go at that. But, you know, if we're going to talk about efficiency, how about, you know, dealing with that bureau inside the CIA, FBI, etc., that are sort of like a private police force for big money people.
Yeah. Hey, let me just say this. Like I said, any organization, whether it be a new CEO, the president of an organization or whatever, they all come in with their own agendas. And what Trump's agenda is to break everything up. And so for him, that may be too good picks for him. Maybe not for us. We may not agree, but for what he is expecting to do to break things up, that's good for him.
UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik. Dennis has an opinion. He's ready to express it. I can tell.
No, it goes all the way back to I'm worried about the Middle East. Okay, you got Rubio now in the State Department, and his understudy, Elise Stefanik, that's going to be in the United Nations as the representative for Israel in the United Nations. She got more money, I think, than anybody from AIPAC. She got $209,000 from AIPAC. Why are you spending all that money? Think about that. And she's going to the UN. Oh, by the way, when we talk about freedom of speech, I know it's hit Scott really hard. You talk about freedom of speech.
Yes.
He was the main leader and driver behind the college campuses of trying to shut down the student protests. Take away our freedom of speech. You get $209,000. And let me just tell you something. We're being isolated too. And that's why I think they're saying that she's a strong supporter of Israel. But I tell you what, if you look at the United Nations, and also if you look at what happened in the last few days in Saudi Arabia, where all the Arabian countries have come together and say, hey, this stuff got to stop. And you got to start watching Turkey too, because Turkey has broken all ties with Israel. And so that's why my main focus, Jeff, when you talk about, the concerns of the people he's picking, he's running things. But oh, by the way, I'm looking at their doctrine and how they feel about the world. And right now, it's not looking too good for the Middle East.
So, that's why I put up this quote of Kennedy that was posted by a former CIA case officer who was arguing, I think, for Tulsi. He said, quoting Kennedy, "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer." And I think that is really the issue here, is that it's still way too partisan. It's not what is actually in the interest of the country, what's in the interest of we the people. Certainly, most people don't want wars. They want to rebuild the industry. They want to rebuild their health care. They want some very basic kinds of things, this idea of some form of expansion. But something you have been saying a number of things, and it reminded me of this story from Abraham Lincoln. And because you said all these cabinet people are the advisors to the president. So at a certain point with Lincoln, he did a poll of his cabinet, and he said, who here thinks that I should sign the Emancipation Proclamation? All of them raised their hand that they were against signing. So he says, well, the ayes have it, meaning just himself. So he decided to go ahead and sign it, even though his whole cabinet was against it. So I mean, that's what we actually need, is somebody who's going to be for the country.
Well, let me just say this in regards to Trump and my concern about the cabinet members and as it focusing on the Middle East. My hope is, in that case, he goes against all of them. I'm just looking at their background and their doctrine.
I agree.
Let's say this. He said, as I stated before, I have a distaste for wars. Those wars in the Middle East are stupid wars. Let me tell you something he did. He went into the Muslim community in Michigan and said, hey, I don't like this. I'm going to support you. One thing about him, he wants to be loved. And though he's known to be a liar, he tries to do what he says he's going to do. And so I'm watching that real closely. And Ryan, going back to what you just said, those that are pushing for us bombing Iran, those of us that's pushing to displace the Palestinians, because of the promise that he made. And oh, by the way, that helped him win Michigan, though, by the way,
Yes.
Oh, yeah. He went right into the belly of the beast. And
Dearborn. He was in Dearborn.
And his opponent,
with the majority,
didn't do it. Yeah.
Didn't do it. Exactly. That's what I tell some of my family and friends. She didn't do that. Now, with that said, my hope now, and they already talked about holding him accountable, and because he don't want to feel like I lied I think, and I hope, and Ryan, you're right. He pulls a Lincoln and say, yeah, you want us to continue this war in Gaza? You want me to bomb Iran? But no, because I made a promise to those folks in Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, is the citizens have to insist that he stick to that. That's what I think.
Absolutely. I told another audience that before. They said, okay, what do we do now? We have to hold our people accountable. We got to hold him accountable. Like I said, the people in Dearborn, Michigan, they got to hold him accountable now.
Yeah.
For the things that he says he's going to do. It takes us. As I told you about, it doesn't stop now. We continue, to influence to make sure that, hey, but I want to keep one other thing in mind, though. Remember this, something you were talking about earlier. As long as money is in politics, it's going to make it hard for the citizens. Because if you're going to pay that, whether it be the pharmaceutical companies we talked about earlier, or whether it be AIPAC and other, Israeli lobbies and any other lobby, as long as they have money, they expect to get a return on investment, those that are pushing that money. And so I believe in those that when they say, hey, they're not going to take money, from the lobbyists and all that good stuff, we need to start looking for people like that.
There's no denying that money plays too much of a role in politics, but let's put it in a perspective. I find it heartening that even though Kamala Harris outspent Trump by quite a bit,
$1 billion.
A billion.
Yeah, right. Trump won. The pauper won. The poverty-stricken candidate won.
Well, see, I tell folks that too. Even though we got money in it, if the citizens get in, look, let me just tell you something. As I told folks, the only reason that whether it be CNN, MSNBC started showing the atrocities in Gaza is because of the fact of social media, and people started rallying to say, hey, this is wrong. That's the only reason it's being discussed right now. So if the people continue to rally, those that want to run for office, stay in office, they look at numbers. Numbers outweigh money, if you have a message. And as I told the folks, whether you like it or not, Trump had a message. He talked plain language. He said, he didn't say anything like, well, I'm going to give you a tax break to buy a home. Well, the majority of our people are poor. They're trying to stay in an apartment, not buy a home. Trump said, I'm going to.
What's $25,000 towards a new home?
I'm going to lower Social Security. What I mean by that, I should say lower. I'm going to not tax Social Security.
Right.
I'm not going to tax tips. I'm going to build a wall, not technology. People can visualize a wall. It's messaging. And my advice to the Democratic Party, you got to have messaging, and you got to listen to the people, and you got to go to Dearborn, Michigan. And oh, by the way, you may have to let them on your platform at your conventions too, if you follow what I'm saying. They did not let any Palestinian family, and that was a big voting block for them. Wouldn't allow them to be able to speak at the doggone national convention.
Well, you mentioned the cost of housing. Now, this didn't turn out to be much of a campaign issue at all, but Trump has this idea of building cities from scratch, which I find very interesting. I'm not quite sure, as he often is, he's a bit vague on how, when it comes to details. And it's a little bit curious, considering that cities are usually, a matter of local government. So I don't know what relationship there would be between the federal government and the locals. But I'm very intrigued by the idea of building cities from scratch. And I don't want to abandon our established cities. They need a lot of help. But by the same token, some of them might be beyond help. So why not see what we can do if it's done from scratch? What do you guys think of this?
I mean, you had the Tennessee Valley Authority that was built, and there was nothing there in that whole area. And because of building the Tennessee Valley Authority, then they were able to bring technologies and improve rural areas, rural electrification, things like that. So I mean, in my view, places like New York City are too crowded, and there are plenty of places where you could build something and bring people in that would be employed in building that city in which they would live. It's actually a very good thing.
Listen, that's not a new idea. As you were talking, I was trying to think of there's some country in the Middle East that actually did that, and they actually and a beautiful city. You will work there, live there. They paid them to move there, and they're in paradise right now. And I always look at we got a lot of land.
The Chinese did that with the Three Gorges Dam. They moved people, they paid them to move, and then they built new cities.
Exactly. So I thought a bad idea. You got to remember now, he is a construction guy, So I'm
Yeah, right. If any president is going to do it, he should be the one.
Yeah, exactly. So, hey.
And I mean, it's logical too that, we've had technological advances and design advances in every aspect of life, but it's kind of hard to implement if the city's already there. But if it's all empty,
but you just move
you can design houses in new ways that haven't ever been done before. I'd love to see how it plays out.
Here's this other thing I thought I'd ask the two of you. The head of the LA Times, his name is Patrick Soon-Shiong. He's a billionaire. He's fired the entire LA Times editorial board. So one thing certainly that I find interesting coming out of this whole electoral process is that maybe there's a shakeup in the media as well.
Oh, there
what
is.
Do you think?
And the Washington Post decided not to endorse anybody, which is really an implied endorsement for Trump.
What do you think about that, Dennis, from the standpoint of the free speech and free and open press and so forth?
Well, let me go back, and I'm looking at Jeff Norman and Ryan Milton. And I saw Jeff's nonverbal there.
What?
You all and others, Scott Ritter, Judge Napolitano, and others are challenging the media, the mainstream media. People now, especially young folks, they're going to podcasts to get their news. And that's challenging. But going back to Los Angeles Times, too, that comes from an internal family battle between the daughter and the owner. Because I think she really got upset because they wasn't going to, I think they wanted to endorse Kamala. And so there was an internal battle. So I'm not surprised they said, okay, we're not going to do it. I think that's a piecemeal treaty between the daughter and the owner of the Los Angeles Times. But I think that the mainstream media is going to come around because of the fact they're getting competition. Let me just tell you something. I forgot who it was, but I think was it Mike Waltz doing his presentation on the Hill. He was talking about balloons coming across. Remember we had the balloon, China balloon coming
Chinese
across?
balloon.
Yeah. Let me tell you something about that. You ready for this? I was in NORAD. If you look at my bio, I was part of NORAD. Those things happen all the time. If they're not, we monitor them, to make sure that, hey, okay, let's see what they're doing. Is it a threat or whatever? The only reason that came out and became a big political thing, you ready for this? That was first shown on TikTok. And then the main media picked that up. I saw it on TikTok. And then the main media picked up because it was getting so many views of people wondering, hey, what is that big balloon that's coming across? Then it became political. We need to shoot it down and all that. But why do I say that? It's challenging the mainstream media. And I think you're going to see a change in them and becoming more open because they're being challenged by social media and so forth.
Right.
Yeah, we've ignored TikTok too much, but Ryan, being the savvy social media guy that he is, has been pushing us in that direction. Is the Winers on TikTok, or just ask the inspector?
Winers is not on. I've just been putting Scott Ritter on TikTok.
Yeah, okay. Eisenhower Media Network. I started seeing, like I say, I saw that. I saw other things. Listen, look, I'm an old guy, but people laugh. I'm a TikTok nut. I don't do a lot of posting, but I'm a TikTok nut because you can really learn a lot of stuff, and it's real time. Like
you're not even on X. You're not even on X. The Eisenhower Media Network is, but not you personally.
I had a communications meeting Tuesday, and they beat me up about that. I do have a Facebook account.
Well, remember, I beat you up about that. About not having.
Yeah, exactly. We would go with Scott.
Yeah. Well, everybody has their strengths. Your colleague and our dear friend Matt Ho is very active on X, but he hasn't written a book. You've written a book.
That's right.
But you're not on X. So
I talked to him about that too. But listen, in fact, my good friend, he's over in the Middle East right now. I got to make sure he left today.
Wow.
So I hope he made it there safely. I got to check it. But look, let me just say this though. Eisenhower Media Network. After I became a nut, I talked about TikTok. We have an account on TikTok now, the Eisenhower Media Network.
Oh, yeah, I know. The Eisenhower Network does, but not you individually.
I know. I got to get it.
Speaking of which, before we close, thank you for letting us go beyond the imposed deadline. But let's mention we had a brunch in New York on October 27th, I think it was. It was great to hang out with you in person. Larry Wilkerson, who's also an Eisenhower fellow, if that's the right word, was there. And we are developing, a cooperative relationship with you guys, and I think it's going great so far. What'd you think of the brunch?
Oh, it was fantastic. Larry and I rode the train up and back, And we talked about that. And man, I just enjoyed that. I was sorry I had to leave, but I think there was some presidential at the time candidate coming into New York.
Yes,
right
some
across the
candidate.
street.
I think his
right
name
across the
is
street.
Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, from the train station. And so
Yeah.
we had to get out of there. But I was sorry we had to leave a few minutes early. But I got to tell you, I loved that event, and I was very happy. I thought it was a very successful event.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you were great, and so was Larry. Now, Ryan and I had the opposite attitude. We didn't go inside Madison Square Garden, but we went to the outside to soak in the atmosphere. It was wild.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can guarantee you. One thing I guarantee you, the people have fun. I know they do.
They
but
do.
To get to the train station, our Uber driver took us on the opposite side, because certain roads were blocked. I wanted to see, what was going on, and plus we had to catch our train, so I didn't get a chance to see any of that.
All right. Should we let him go, Ryan?
Yes. No, we got to be fair to Dennis, so that way he'll come back again. So,
hey, let me tell y'all something. As I told you all, I've not been considered a drinker, and then I started drinking every now and then, like once in a blue moon. And just for your show, I had to take one. But now because I'm not a drinker, y'all better let me off because y'all got me all excited, and I was drinking that down. And as I told you, I hadn't had dinner yet, and so I think it's gone to my head. So to your audience, I apologize if I got.
We're a bad influence on you, and we don't even know what's in the glass. You said your wife gave you a mystery.
I don't know. Yes, I hope it's not poison.
All right. Well, thanks for getting in the spirit of the Winers. We love you. We love the Eisenhower Media Network. And we hope to have you on as often as you care to be on. Let's remind folks that Dennis's book, Deadly Betrayal, can be purchased on our website, scottritter.com. And if you want to visit the Eisenhower Media Network website, it's, believe it or not, EisenhowerMediaNetwork.org.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, thank you all for having me on. And a very special thank you to your audience for putting up with me. Okay.
Thank you so much for being here, Dennis.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right.
Thank you.
Take
You as
care.
well.